thousands of Congolese went out in the streets of Goma to show their support for the Democratic Republic of Congo's armed forces. They were out to protest against neighbour Rwanda's support for the M23 rebels. The protest takes place a day after government reiterated claims Kigali backed the notorious M23 rebel group. For more on this, we're joined by a professor of political sciences at the University of the Western Cape, Bheki Mngomezulu. Prof, a very good evening to you. Thank you for your time. Kigali's involvement in supporting the M23 rebel group seemingly at the center of this. Talk to us about who exactly this group is.
No, thank you very much for having me, my sister. Yeah, the situation between Rwanda and the DRC is concerning. Basically, there are three groups that are at the center of this chaos. One is the M23 that we just referred to, which is operating from the DRC and is intending to basically make life difficult for the government of the Democratic Republic of Congo. But then you also have a group called the FDLR, which is a group that is basically made up of Rwandese who are also operating in the eastern part of the DRC. And what is happening with M23 is that the DRC is blaming Rwanda for sponsoring them, both financially and in terms of arms and ammunition. An accusation which Rwanda's President Paul Kagame is in fact refuting. At the same time, President Kagame is also blaming the DRC for supporting the other rebel group, that is the FDLR, which is basically destabilizing Rwanda. And the accusation is that because they are operating in the DRC, the assumption is that the DRC government is sponsoring them. And to make matters worse, you also have the ADF, which originally comes from Uganda, but then was ousted from Uganda in the 1990s and also found bases in the DRC. So they are also operating from the DRC. So all these three groups are now operating the DRC, and then the blame game is coming from either country saying that so and so is responsible. That is basically the context within which the situation has presented itself.
With the blame game underway, President Kagame refuting the allegation, the Congo is not taking this matter lightly because they've since made some moves by cutting ties with Rwanda's air flights. And of course, this is something that's had a ripple effect in terms of mixed views on the decision.
Indeed, my sister, I will recall that in 2013, there was a UN-sponsored agreement that included 11 countries. South Africa was also party to that particular agreement, wherein the decision by the UN was that all the countries in the Great Lakes region should find one another, so that there is no country that is going to blame another one, and there is no country that is going to harbor any of these rebels. But then we see this thing continuing, which means that the 2013 UN brokered peace deal is now falling by the wayside. But then to come to a question about the two countries, Rwanda and DRC, cutting ties, it's concerning for the region. It's also concerning for countries even outside of the region. Like I just mentioned, that South Africa is in a way involved in those issues in terms of the country's ability to negotiate whenever there are problematic situations across the African continent. So now with Rwanda and the DRC cutting ties, basically even diplomatic ties, because we heard that some diplomats have been recalled, which is what normally happens in international relations, that if you are not happy about a particular situation, one way of retaliating without necessarily invoking what we normally refer to as hard power, wherein we are going to fight militarily, you normally go for soft power, which then includes basically severing relations between your country and then the other country. So that is what has happened. But then it will also have economic and negative impacts on both countries, because once you ground flights, then it means that tourism is affected. It also means that businesses are affected, and then the list goes on. Not to say that, of course, there are people who are going to run away from the situation, and that is going to lead to political instability as well as economic instability in the region.
Yeah, and some residents, perhaps some critics, have said that if other countries followed suit, then Rwanda would get a much clearer message in terms of the retaliation.
Absolutely. But then the question is Rwanda really guilty of the crimes that the country has been blamed of? Because at the moment, we don't know for sure, like I was saying at the beginning, that the DRC is in fact blaming Rwanda for sponsoring M23. But then Rwanda is also making the same accusation against the DRC. So now if you sever these relations, you are basically sending the message that you have concrete evidence that the country that you are blaming is in fact guilty of the crimes leveled against that particular country, which at the moment I'm not sure they have hard evidence. So now, let's say hypothetically speaking, then it so emerges that the allegations were unfounded, and you have already severed the relations, you have already grounded flights, you have already recalled your ambassadors. Then what does it do in terms of relations between the two countries, and then, of course, relations within the region? Because the 2013 deal that I was referring to included countries like Angola, countries like Tanzania, and the list goes on. So then the moment there are political upheavals between the two countries, they will directly or indirectly affect other countries as well, even beyond the Great Lakes region, like I've just said, including your Central African Republic and many others. So this is something of serious concern than it appears at the moment. So unless they arrest the situation now, chances are you'll find a number of countries supporting either Rwanda or the DRC, and the situation will get out of hand sooner than later.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your time. A very complex matter. Professor Bheki Mngomezulu of the University of the Western Cape, we thank you for your time.